Hi everyone, my name is Nancy Rosales and I'm doing shoplifting as my topic. Let's start off with these pictures. So as these pictures that you're seeing here, shoplifting is not just deemed to one specific population. Anyone of any age, any race, and any gender can commit this crime. Let's start with what shoplifting actually is. By definition, shoplifting is the criminal act of stealing goods from a shop or a store while pretending to be a customer. This is why in many stores today, we the customers are warned by signs that we are being recorded and that anyone who is stealing will be persecuted. Pretty much like the sign pictured here, you've probably seen that in your local pharmacy, grocery store, or department stores. The prevalence in the United States. The National Association for Shoplifting Persecution, also known as NASP, is an organization that is dedicated to raising awareness and educating the public about the threats of shoplifting to consumers, as well as keeping statistics on how shoplifting has affected Americans. Their statistics are as follows. There are approximately 27 million shoplifters, or 1 in 11 people in the United States today. However, only 1 in 48 people are actually caught for this crime. More than $13 billion worth of goods are stolen from retailers each year. If you translate this to cost per day, it rounds up to $35 million a day. How crazy is that? According to the statistics from the NASP, there is no typical shoplifter profile. Like you saw on the previous pictures, anybody from any age, any race, any gender can commit this crime. It can range from a man putting something as simple as a razor into his pocket or an elderly woman stuffing something in her jacket. The numbers show that both men and women shoplift equally. 25% of shoplifters are underage and 75% of shoplifters are adults. 55% of adult shoplifters' primary excuse for committing the crime is that they are shoplifting for their teenagers. Statistics show that shoplifters almost never commit any other kind of crime, and shoplifting is often not a premeditated crime. 73% of adults and 72% of juvenile shoplifters don't plan to steal in advance. 57% of adults and 33% of juveniles say it is hard for them to stop shoplifting even if they get caught. Many shoplifters buy and steal merchandise in the same visit to cover up that they are in the store for an extended period of time without buying anything. For example, let's say that a shoplifter is in a makeup aisle for a long period of time. They will most likely pick an item that is very cheap. That way they will take that, ring it out, even though they have 5 items in their pocket that they don't plan to pay for. Now, you might be thinking, I don't shoplift, so this doesn't affect me, right? Wrong. That's what I thought. For most of the population, we are all under the impression that this is a victimless crime. So who cares? Just find them and keep it moving, right? However, we fail to realize that we are the ones who actually suffer and aren't even the ones committing the crime. Let me break this down further. Because of the losses that the companies lose on a day-to-day due to shoplifting, we the consumers suffer because the prices skyrocket to cover the losses. A product usually that you would pay $5 for is now $10, and so on and so forth. How messed up is that? New York State laws on shoplifting. In New York State, shoplifting is punished as larceny. By definition, larceny is committed when a person wrongfully takes, obtains, or withholds the property of another person with the intent to not give it back. Shoplifting is charged as petty larceny if the value of the item stolen is $1,000 or less. If the value is $1,000 or more, it is charged as grand larceny. In addition to criminal penalties, shoplifters face civil suits by victimized merchants to recover damages. Basically, when the shoplifter is caught within the store, the merchant takes a picture of all the items that were being stolen, totals up the value of them, and writes it in the police report. However, when trying to recover money for these items at a later date, the shoplifter does not always have to pay the full amount that they stole. The merchant settles for a partial amount sometimes. This is just a chart so that it can better break down the different charges. So I'll go through each one with you. So the charge for shoplifting property with a value of $1,000 or less. It's classified as petty larceny, also a Class A misdemeanor. The penalty can be imprisonment for up to a year and fined up to $1,000. A common alternative for this is an ACOD. ACOD would mean that you would have to stay out of trouble for 6 months to a year, depending on which time length they do give you, and you would have to be part of a class, for a shoplifting class, basically. If you are able to meet these requirements and stay out of trouble for that period of time and do the requirement of the class, then you are able to get your record expunged. But this is mostly only offered to first-time offenders just because they want to give them an opportunity instead of just imprisoning them. Shoplifting property with a value of more than $1,000 and equal to or less than $3,000 is grand larceny in the 4th degree, a Class E felony. This is imprisonment up to 4 years. You can be fined up to $5,000 or double the offender's gain from the crime. Shoplifting property with a value of more than $3,000 and equal to or less than $5,000 is grand larceny in the 3rd degree, a Class D felony. This can be imprisonment up to 7 years, fined up to $5,000, or double the offender's gain from the crime. Shoplifting property with a value of more than $50,000 and equal to or less than $1 million is grand larceny in the 2nd degree, a Class C felony. Imprisonment up to 15 years, fine $5,000, or double the offender's gain from the crime. Shoplifting property with a value of more than $1 million is grand larceny in the 1st degree, a Class B felony. Imprisonment up to 25 years and fined up to $5,000, or double the offender's gain from the crime. So, criminological needs. By definition, this means that if the offender had this, something that they need but are lacking, would they have still committed the crime? As mentioned before by the NASP, there isn't a typical shoplifter. They come in all different ages, races, and sizes. Dynamic factors can be poor social economic environment, poverty, children, substance abuse, loss of or no job, peers who do it, or peer pressure. In the article that I did do, it examined the recidivism data for juvenile offenders discharged from a Massachusetts treatment center between 1976 and 1995. 162 delinquent youth referred through Massachusetts Department of Youth Services who left the program reviewed. Recidivism was defined as any post-program juvenile or adult conviction. Chronic offenders, 4 arrests prior to the commitment, made up 57% of the sample. As expected, chronic offending was highly associated with recidivism. Treatment options that were discussed for shoplifting within the article were psychiatric disorder. Due to kleptomania, shoplifting can be perceived as a disorder because we, as mental health professionals, still don't understand a person's need to steal. Many shoplifters suffer from bipolar/depression disease. Cognitive behavior therapy, CBT. The offender needs to admit that he or she needs help, or the shoplifting will just continue. This ties in the offender potentially suffering from depression because it is shown in their emotional life. It is shown that if in their emotional life it improves, the desire to shoplift will disappear. Support groups. There are many meetings just like NA. Groups of people who come together and talk about their urges to want to shoplift without judgment. NASP also has a few programs. Shoplifters Alternative Course, SA course for adults, or the Youth Educational Shoplifting Program, YES program. Both of those are classes that explain how you impulsively make the decisions to shoplift. It will help change the thinking, feelings, and attitudes about shoplifting, and it will also reduce your risk of shoplifting and getting arrested in the future. And the most popular one that is also offered with an ACOD, as mentioned before, is a stop lift or stop class. It is provided to the first-time offenders to educate them on the consequences of their behavior to prevent recidivism. These are done by trained counselors and talks about legal consequences of continued behavior also incorporated in that. Treatments that actually work. So treatment options for shoplifters are limited. Treatment has traditionally involved psychological counseling, behavior modeling, psychotherapy, medication, or more intensive psychiatric treatment. Therapy is the most common treatment for shoplifters, however, and it has been proven to actually work. However, even with these treatments, since we don't fully understand the need for an individual to steal or the urge psychologically, that we have not yet cracked a way to completely help this population. So there is still a lot of research to be done. Measures and tools. In order to reduce recidivism, offenders need to change their dynamic factors. 89% of kids say they know other kids who shoplift. 66% say they actually hang out with those kids. For that 66%, it is easy for them to be peer pressure into stealing. It is better to remove themselves from these situations to avoid any bad consequences. As far as the stores, they can improve store layouts and displays, upgrade retail security, hire store detectives, ban known shoplifters, and start using electric article surveillance, a pin that will ring the alarm if it is to leave the store. Improvements that I would suggest. I believe that with this population, the main thing that is missing is a follow-up. It is very easy for these offenders to get lost in the system. What I mean by that is that once these offenders complete their treatment, they go on living their own lives. And we fail to realize that sometimes it is not only a one-time momentary lapse of judgment, and it could be a deeper rooted issue. I would suggest that if you are enrolled in any of these classes that are offered, they check up on you. Kind of like mandatory progress reports. That way, if you are having a hard time giving up shoplifting, you still have the professionals at your disposal. Community-based programs should be implemented that can offer the same kind of classes, not just for the first-time offenders like Shoplift and NASP programs do, but for everyone, with no charge for the people who just want to become educated but can't afford the class. Raising a more awareness on the fact that this is a growing epidemic in America and that it is okay to ask for help because it could be a psychological issue could really help the population. Anyway, thank you for listening to my presentation, and I hope you guys learned a little bit about shoplifting, because I know that I did. Hopefully, I will hear from all of you in the discussion post underneath. Thanks!